You've decided you want to go for it and smoke a whole brisket, but you want to make sure you do it right. Follow these tips to make sure you have success at the smoker. Brisket's a huge time investment, and there's a cluster of information out there surrounding it. Stick around for these fundamentals so you can be a backyard brisket barbecue hero.
When purchasing a brisket, this is how you will tend to find them. This is a whole brisket, untrimmed and in the original packaging. Be careful not to cut into the brisket when opening the bag. You don't want any gashes in the meat. Drying off the brisket with a paper towel is helpful because it makes it easier to hold onto and it won't slide around on the cutting board when you're working with your knife. When trimming, you are mostly looking for large pieces of fat to cut off and to trim down the thicker fat. There isn't a lot of silver skin that needs to be removed on a brisket, but there is a little bit of knife work necessary. There's a fairly large piece of fat between the flat and the point that you will have to cut out. It won't really render down while it's cooking, so it's best to remove it now. It's also helpful to square off the brisket. You want it as sleek as possible so that it cooks evenly and it prevents parts of it from burning. I'm just removing excess pieces of fat from the flat, not trying to trim off everything in sight. That looks pretty nicely trimmed now. You'll want to trim down the fat on the top side as well. We're looking for 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch of fat to protect it while it's smoking, but there are some thick spots you want to cut out altogether. And again, I'll cut off some pieces that might burn in the smoker. You can always chop up this meat and add it to chili. There is some blue coloration on here. That's just from the USDA stamp, which is totally food safe, but it looks a little odd, so I'll trim that down as well. There's a thick piece of fat on the point of this brisket that I'm gonna trim down because again, it won't render out. Finally, we'll remove this other large piece of hard fat that sit between the flat and the point of the brisket. It's similar to the piece that we removed on the other side. It's better to remove it in the beginning than to try and navigate around it after it's been cooked. There's a nicely trimmed brisket that's ready for the smoker. Now we can start by prepping the fire. I'll be using a big green egg to smoke this brisket, so we're using hardwood lumped charcoal and some wood chunks. Charcoal starters are great for bringing the charcoal up to temp without creating too big of a fire. I like to fan out the corners of the starters so they ignite easily. Once the starters are lit, add the hickory wood chunks and return the diffuser and grill grate to the cooker. The diffuser protects the brisket from direct heat, and I wrap it in foil to make cleanup easy. Close the lid and adjust the top damper and bottom draft door. You'll only want the top and bottom open 1 to 2 inches. We're targeting 225 degrees, so just adjust the airflow until you find that the temp is staying consistent. Once you get there, the egg will do the rest of the work. Coarse kosher salt and 16 to 18 mesh dustless black pepper are the classic combination for seasoning. Using dustless pepper creates a better crust and won't create a paste on the surface from the fine pepper dust. Also, using salt and pepper of the same size will allow for even distribution of both. I like to use a shaker to ensure that the seasoning is even across the surface. Letting this sit overnight will help the salt penetrate the brisket and season throughout the meat. But for the sake of the video, I'm going straight onto the cooker. I'll cook it fat side down since the heat source is coming from the bottom of the grill. The grill should maintain the temp around 225 degrees without having to adjust the dampers too much. Once the brisket hits 160 degrees, it's time to wrap. I prefer using unlined peach paper because it is semi-permeable and will allow a little steam to escape, but still keep moisture in when cooking it the rest of the way. If you don't have peach paper, you can use aluminum foil, but I think the bark is more pronounced when using the peach paper. Make sure the paper is folded tightly around the meat. Keeping some of that steam in is key to pushing the brisket through what is known as the stall. The stall is when it starts to slow down during the cook, but you don't want to turn up the heat. A good wrap will just help it keep moving along. We'll put this back in the smoker for a couple hours or until it reaches between 195 and 200 degrees internally. Once it hits your final temp, it'll be time to give it a rest. I like to put it in a warm cooler lined with kitchen towels. This will keep it warm while it's resting for at least an hour, but preferably 2. Once it's had time to rest and those juices have redistributed, we can finally slice into this smoky slab of beef. Be fairly gentle when unwrapping the brisket. It will be extremely tender and you don't want to tear it before you get to slice into it. you can see that beautiful dark bark has developed and it's got that tender meat jiggle. I'm actually gonna start by cutting it in half. First of all, I wanna see that juicy smoked brisket cross section. Just look at those juices oozing from that mouth-watering hunk of brisket. There's another reason to cut this in half as well. You can see that the grain in the flat is very pronounced, so you'll want to cut against the grain when slicing the flat of the brisket. Where it gets a little confusing is on the point side of the brisket. There are two separate muscles that meet at the point, and the grain doesn't run the exact same direction on the flat as it does on the point. Since the point is much more pronounced on this end, you'll want to make sure you're slicing against the grain on the point half of the brisket while trying to intersect the remaining portion of the flat. Sometimes it's easier to find the grain direction from the fattier side of the point and then just slice against the grain in 1/4-inch slices.
With these brisket fundamentals, you're armed to become a backyard barbecue master. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time outside of the test kitchen here at Certified Angus Beef.